Please, Dr. Yasser.
So we will be talking, in fact, about designing grand and local challenge projects, and especially what is theory of change. So myself, Dr. Yasser Nawab, I'm working as associate professor at National Textile University. I'm also leading School of Engineering and Technology as dean, and I'm working as director, National Center for Composite Materials. For productivity, I have published about 110 impact factor articles, advised 8 PhDs, and especially for the research funding, I have won 407 million rupees of funding from the different funding bodies, out of which 30 million, in fact, is from industry, one GCF, two TDF, two NRPU, university industry, technology support program, and then 12 different programs with the industry. I'm also working as consultant with WWF, textile industry, and several government sector organizations. So for building a proposal, the first thing that I will advise is that we need to start from the very basic. Read very carefully. The first thing is eligibility, and then what funding bodies want. In fact, we researchers, we remain always into our own shells. We think with respect to what we have done in our PhDs, what we are doing research on, and the scientific research specifically. So we don't, in fact, focus a lot on what funding bodies want. So in fact, it's very important. Then we need to read very carefully the review process and review rubrics. So these 3 points, they will give us an idea that how we will be evaluated, how our proposal will be evaluated, and what funding body, in fact, wants from this research grant. So for building a proposal, we need to keep into our mind that it must be relevant to our background. First thing. The second thing is that its impact must be measurable. Means it must have some objectives that can be measured. It must be feasible. And then the institute in which you are sitting, or you can say your partner institutes, they must have capacity to do this research. So once you have an idea, I will be sharing with you some examples later on. We need to discuss with our colleagues, even with students, with experts of the domain, if our objectives, these are clear, if the research is feasible, if it can have an impact. And in order to check that whether it's clear or not, I would advise that you should discuss it with your spouse, your mother or grandmother. So in general, we say that if you can explain your proposal very clearly, especially its objectives, its output, its impacts, to someone who is layman, so if you are able to explain to him or her, it means your proposal is clear. So I always start writing a concept paper, 1 page. So the first thing is the introduction and importance, why we need to write this proposal. Then its objectives, what are the inputs, what are the requirements, especially in terms of human resource, faculty, student, collaborators. So we need to be very careful while selecting the faculty, students, and collaborators. In general, we do it like this, okay, ये मैं हूँ, मेरे ये साथ बैठते हैं, ये मेरे अच्छे दोस्त हैं, तो इनको भी साथ इसमें डाल लेते हैं. So we should avoid, in fact, such things. It must be a professional proposal, and our decisions, it must be serious decisions. Of course, all the evaluators, they come from the academia, from industry, they have a very good expertise and experience. So they can sense very quickly that if the proposal is made like professionally or not. Then available resources, they must be kept in mind, and what is required. then we can decide. Sports required from industry. I'm working a lot with industry, and in the beginning, I took a lot of letters from industry. Okay, you will be supporting us in kind or in terms of technical expertise. And then I started asking from myself, okay, if my proposal is beneficial for the industry, so they should be contributing in it, and especially in terms of cash, they must be contributing. So letters, in fact, okay, they are sufficient or they are enough to like meet the requirements of funding body. But if you have some serious like end user or industry, so they must be contributing in it. Budget required from HEC, as we are talking about here, HEC. So salaries, equipment, material, most of the fundings that HEC is providing these days, these are not for building the labs. I have seen in LCF, they are supporting, there is one element, but in most of the proposals, in fact, these grants, they are not supposed to establish the labs. So we need to be like very judicious about salaries, about the requirement of equipment. We need to write the equipment and material which are justified, which are relevant to the requirements, what will be the outcomes, what will be the impact, and what is the timeline, a judicious timeline, because in Pakistan we have a lot of limitations during purchase and etc. So I always start with this one page summary. I say that this is a concept paper. I write all the things on it. I discuss them with my colleagues. I discuss with my seniors. I discuss even with my students, okay, if you understand. And then sometimes with like my mother or with my wife, okay, if I explain to you in 5 minutes, so would you like to tell me later on, okay, what you understand? So I have already discussed about this, that the team member selection, in fact, it's very important. You need to be very careful. The team members, they must be those who really contribute, who are really needed. Then scientific advancements, whatsoever we are proposing, we should discuss with the experts their scientific merit, feasibility, methodology, all the things must be. In fact, we have already fair, okay, maybe someone, they will like, ye chura na le ji hamara idea. So if you look at Google, you will find a lot of ideas, thousands of ideas. So if you have fear, you can like sign an NDA with the person you are sharing, but you should discuss. You should discuss with the experts of the domain, the feasibility, methodologies, merits. They are always very helpful. Have the discussion with end user or industry and have a detailed discussion, and try to have some like solid support from them if it is really, if they really think that they are the stakeholders. Once you have decided your stakeholders, then you may like develop a SC chart. Uh, all the members who will be there in the team, all the students, uh, all the faculty members, industry, your university management. So who will be responsible, who will be accountable? Of course, you will be accountable. The PI is always accountable for all the activities of a project. Then who will be responsible? So of course, responsible, you can, your co-PIs, they can be responsible for some of the activities. PhD students, they can be responsible. C for consult. So, for example, in some cases, you will be consulting with the industry. In some cases, in some activities, they will be responsible. And then information, of course, your department, your like university administration, HEC, you will be keep informing them. So make a SC chart. It is very helpful in order to define the roles and the responsibilities. So budget, it must be detailed with justification. In journal, we say, okay, we need this material, why, to do the experiments. So in my view, it's not sufficient. We need to write the material with proper justification. Same is for the equipment, and same is, in fact, for PhD students. In general, for PhD students, we need okay, we need PhD student in order to do this activity. And that activity is performed also by MS students, by co-PIs, by PIs. So justification for 3 to 4% is almost same. So in fact, this create confusion in the mind of evaluators as well. So if you write it, it is in fact very good for a project. If you know that what your PhD student will be doing before while designing the project, so it's very helpful during execution. So spend your time while planning and while designing the project. Then timelines, make the timelines very detailed. Like for my specific project, it was a timeline of 4 to 5, and later on we expanded it. So when we say theory of change, so theory of change is in fact a systematic way that we start like investigating the problem, what are the causes, then we like list down the root causes. Once we know the root causes, then we start working on methodology that will be used in order to solve these problems. Then outcome, impact, how that impact will be measured. For example, if we have a project, for my project, we said that we will contribute to increase the exports of Pakistan by $1 billion. So it's an impact. So how will we measure that impact? It must be measurable. And what are the key performance indicators, like quarterly key performance indicator, biannually key performance indicator, from which you can assess, okay, you are going well, then some milestones and assessment methodology. Yes, there should be a dissemination strategy as well. It's very important, especially for academia. We need to spend sufficient time to answer all the questions. When I say all the questions, so it means questions which are being asked in the draft proposal, which are being shared by HEC, or even the questions which are being like asked in the rubrics from the evaluators. So you see from another point of view, okay, if evaluator is looking for information for a certain information, is it available in the proposal or not? So if it is not given, because the sections which are giving in the proposal by HEC, these are very generic. So you can add some subsection keeping in view the rubrics. And don't wait till the last minute to meet the deadlines. Being Pakistani, we always spend the things to the last minute. Try to spend sufficient time and try to complete the work well before time. So I will be sharing, in fact, very quickly, a case study of my GCF project. It was enhancement of global competitiveness of Pakistan textile export value chains by capacity building and product diversification. One thing before going into detail, what I would like to share that how we can assess that this problem or this challenge is grand challenge or local challenge or not. So basically, we researchers in university, we think with respect to keeping in view the science that we are dealing with. For example, if I'm working on a certain science, on certain research area, so I try to find a problem that can be fit into my research. I think we need to do otherwise. We need to look at the problems first, and then we should find the researchers who are fitting into this, the solution of this research problem. So there are a lot of problems. If you look around Pakistan में आप अभी बैठेंगे, ये जितने colleagues बैठे हुए हैं, इनके पास 100 problems होंगे. अच्छा जी, पाकिस्तान का ये problem है, पाकिस्तान का वो problem है. All these problems are almost grand challenges for the country. For example, for exports, uh, the value of dollar, uh, the value of Pakistani rupee in comparison to dollar is depreciating. And one of the reason is, in fact, the gap between exports and imports. We are importing a lot, we are not exporting a lot. So it's a national problem. So we need to look into the problems like this. We have a lot of national problems, and even into our area, we have a lot of local problems. So we need to look into the problems. Otherwise, our proposal is, it will be just like an NRPU, a scientific proposal. So what we tried to, in fact, work on, it was enhancement of global competitiveness of Pakistani textile export value chains by capacity building and product diversification. We name our project as Knowledge Textiles. Uh, it was NOTEX in abbreviation. So the importance textile, in fact, we did a complete, you can say, a study of 6 months, because we were working on the domain, uh, on this domain since like for 5 years. So 6 months before this call, we were working on like listing the key reasons, or you can say that the root causes of stagnant Pakistani exports. So Pakistan is depending a lot on textiles. It's contributing 58% to exports, 8.5% to GDP, 45% to employment. So today, Pakistan's textile exports, they are about 14.5 billion US dollar, and overall about 25. So in Vision 2025, we said that we will achieve a target of $150 billion. And since last 15 years, we are saying that we will be doubling our textile exports. In fact, this is the actual scenario. It's almost same since last 15 years, and these are exports of Pakistan. Instead of doubling or achieving 150 billion US dollar, it's decreasing. So we said that it's a grand national challenge, but in fact, the problem is complex. There are a lot of causes. So we did a diagnosis study, we did literature review, survey, interviews from the experts, from industry, like CEOs, managers, associations, and then we did a SWOT analysis. I will be sharing with you very quickly. Uh, Maybe it will help you to uh, narrow down your causes. So the first thing that we find that Pakistan, in fact, we are producing a lot of natural fiber textile composites, natural fiber textiles, whereas world is 70% into man-made. Pakistan is lagging behind the world. Bangladesh, Vietnam, they are increasing. Pakistan is lowest in the region. Like in the last decade, Pakistan's exports increased by 28%, and all others, Vietnam, India, China, Bangladesh, they are increasing at a very fast pace. So the first cause that we find that Pakistan is doing good in the categories which have small volume, whereas Pakistan is not doing very good in the domains or in the product range where the volume is high. So this was our first cause. Then we find that Pakistan's product range, in fact, is very small. Only 3 product groups, they are contributing 50% of Pakistan exports. Then we have 2 types of textile: conventional textile, technical textile. Technical textile, in fact, they are giving a lot of profit, but our share in global market is only 0.3%. We are more into commodity textile where profit margins are low. Then the market, so our market is not very diverse. Almost 100 billion US dollar of market we are not tapping. Mostly we are dependent on cotton, and the textile are concentrated into the cotton belt. There are a lot of other resources like sheep. We have 30 million sheep, and we are not using their wool. We have other crops like hemp, flax, jute, a lot of crop of banana in Sindh. We are not using it. And despite a big claim that we are agriculture country, in 2020, we imported about 1.15 billion US dollar of fibers. We are lacking in technology. Industry 4.0 is not in Pakistan. So it can be a grand challenge, another grand challenge. We did not address it. That how we can shift our industry to industry 4.0. Productivity of our workers, though the wages are low, but productivity of our workers is not good. In fact, we are among the lowest productive nation in the world. We did not brand made in Pakistan globally and even in Pakistan. If you want to search like a B2B or B2C market space for textile manufacturers, it's not available in Pakistan. And there are other a lot of reasons, obsolete technology. We are not able to meet global compliances. Number of exporters is limited, law and order situation, cost of utilities, stability in policies, interest rate, and foreign direct investment is not coming. We have some strengths as well. Fiber to end product infrastructure is available. Our global repute is good. Workforce is available. Knowledge base is available. And due to this crisis, industry is willing to change. Then we did a detailed analysis, and we find that even with like current resources, we can export, we can increase our export up to 12.5 billion US dollar, out of which $7 billion is textile. And these are the products that can be tapped. So then we list down all the reasons, that the causes: lack of innovation, lack of product diversification, as I have mentioned earlier. And then we said, okay, there are some root causes that we need to address. 4 things we decided that they may impact, they can create more impact than other causes. The first thing is indigenization. We need to use our local resources. And this one is very important. In fact, our textile industry, which is the biggest industry in Pakistan, it's not knowledge based. They are mostly in commodity products, which are being like advised or ordered by the customer. We don't design new products, and we are not in the knowledge based products with more profits. Productivity enhancement, it was another objective that we are trying to address in this project. And then branding, showcasing, and policy recommendation to the industry. So this was all about that, how we worked to develop our proposal. And this took the most of our time. In fact, it was spent on finding the causes, root causes, and then how to address it. So we, in fact, converted all our solution into, divided all our solution into 8 work packages. We said that we will explore natural fibers. This is work package 1. In fact, dividing your all the work into different segments is called work breakdown structure, and all these are work packages. Then value added textiles from Lochi wool. So we said that we need to address this. This is the biggest resource which is available in Balochistan in Pakistan. So as we were mainly based in Faisalabad and Karachi, so in order to address this work package, we engaged then Balochistan University of Information and Technology, the textile engineering department. Then upgradation of local like manufacturing of textile machinery. And this is the biggest work package: transformation to man-made fiber-based textile and indigenous development of novel and high-end textile regions. Then capacity building using smart market research and branding, dissemination, and implementation. So we took logical decisions. For example, market research and blending. I'm an engineer, so it was not my job. We engaged a business school that, okay, you will be working on it. For this, we engaged like industrial engineering team who had a long experience of working on this. For this, in fact, the 4 and 5, these were our core researchers, the core scientists who are working to develop new products. Then Balochistan University of Information Technology. And for the first one, we engaged fiber technologists. So our project, in fact, the selection of team, it was based on the need of project. Then we engaged industry. In fact, we were discussing with them. So we engaged top 10 textile exporters. There are also top 10 exporters of Pakistan. So we engaged them. They are working with us from the first day. Then universities, government departments, textile associations. So we tried to engage all the stakeholders, and they were not only like for the sake of letters. We had meetings with them, detailed meetings with them. We shared with them the proposal. We took their feedback, and we changed or modified our proposal, keeping in view their like feedback. So this was our methodology. The first step was lab scale development or prototype development, the testing and optimization. We are doing it at university. Industry is involved even at this step. But at this step, their role is mainly advisory role. They are not contributing in it in the lab scale development. The next step will be industrial scale development. So all the lab scale development or prototyping, they will be upscaled by the industry and they will be bearing all the cost which is being involved. Means machinery cost, material cost, while upscaling it will be there. Like job, if there are some things that we need to optimize, it will come again to university, again to industry. And once the things are there, the first right to commercialize is by partner industry. It will be implementing. The next step will be like dissemination of results to other industries. It will be done through associations. And for some new products, we are like aiming to launch some startups as well. And finally, recommendations, policy recommendations, they will be being shared with government and associations. So this is our work package structures. I have shared a screenshot of it. We have a title, then we have responsible of each work package, his team, academic collaborators, sectoral collaborators, and then some industries which are like partner in it. Then we have RESI chart I have shared with you earlier. Then task and deliverables. So with HEC, mainly they demanded that we need to give task and deliverables biannually. But for our working, we have further narrowed it down. So for every 6 months, for each work package, we have 12 tasks and then deliverables. So at the project level, we are doing it at monthly and at quarterly level. So for each month and for each quarter, to each student, to each faculty, to each work package leader, we have assigned the task. It's a very detailed working. Every one has, we are using a project management software, and everything is like given, they are updating the status on daily basis, keeping in view the due dates and deadlines. So we know very like oftenly that if there are some bottlenecks and if there is some problem. So if you will be working on properly while developing the proposal, it will be very easy for you to decide judicially that how much resources you are needed. So this is impact. We like anticipated that this project within 3 to 5 years of completion, this will create an impact of $1 billion of export. In fact, it's very underrated. What we are expecting, this is committed, and what we are expecting, in fact, is $5 billion, 3 to 5 years after project completion. We are working a lot on product diversification. What we will be doing, we will be sharing implementation ready solutions with the industry. In fact, it's very important that, especially in this project, the lab scale developments, they will be upscaled during the life of this project. And we are seeing that we are committing that 9 patentable textile products will be produced at least, which will be made in Pakistan. And these products are not only patentable, they are also commercializable. We are developing a Pakistan textile portal, and we are developing a strategy. Our business school is working on it for development of a strategy for branding and market diversification, especially in the markets where we are absent. We are also working on upgradation of local machines. So we are anticipating that at least 300,000 machines, especially the looms, they will be upgraded within 3 to 5 years of completion of this work. We are completing value chain for use of high-end local natural fibers. Recently, we have completed one of them, and the technology and the value chain information, they are being like licensed to an industry for a value of rupees 10 million. So this is in fact the first impact that we have created, and it's being commercialized. We are expecting that 100,000 new jobs they will be created, and there'll be impact on 100,000 sheep breeders in Pakistan. The young students, they will be trained on solving applied research problems. And the most important thing that I think is that we will have at the end of this project, we will have confidence. When I say we, it means industry, government, HEC, academia, that we can solve community problem with a collective approach. We are like anticipating 10 to 15 startups, and we are expecting that we will have a significant impact, especially in the domain of textile on SDGs 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 7. So we divided this impact into all the work packages. So for first work package, we have an impact in terms of export, for second, for third. So it means everyone has target that he or she, the project leader, that team, they have to achieve this impact. So they have the targets. Then we list on the originalities. Okay, in the perspective of Pakistan, it's a common thing that we researcher ask, okay, we are going to solve the problem of Pakistan. In Europe, the problems like this have been solved 50 years ago. Yes, in Europe, they are being solved, but if you go into detail, there are a lot of originality that we will find. In Pakistan, in fact, it's a different context, and there are a lot of things which are different. We go into detail. So we list on originality. Then we defined our key performance indicators. These key performance indicators are like biannual or 6-monthly key performance indicators. For each work package, we have in first month some key performance indicators, and these are measurable. And what we are expecting that by the end of 2 years, almost all the work packages, they will have their required products or the process. So in the last year, mainly we will be working on technology transfer. In some of the work packages, as I have mentioned earlier, that in one work package, we have already signed a technology transfer agreement. So especially for the assessment, okay, how we will know that really this project has created this impact. So as we have working on development of specific products, so we know their HS scores, and we will be following, in fact, the increase in exports of HS scores, especially by the industries we are working. So though, in fact, this strategy, it's not very, you can say, precise, but still we will have an idea. So thank you very much. I try to share my experience very quickly, some advices. So I'm very hopeful that they will be helpful for you. Over to you, Ganisa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yasir Nawab, for a fantastic presentation and a wonderful project indeed that you have won grant for, and we wish you all the luck and success in this project. We would like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Mohamed Opal, who's going to also take us through one of his case studies and perhaps help the audience understand how to develop strong logical frameworks for interventions that can ultimately maximize the chances of achieving the outcomes and impact that you intend from that project. Dr. Mohamed Opal comes with a vast experience of winning lots of grants and implementing lots of projects, and we're looking forward to his knowledge and his guidance as we guide you guys how to develop your proposals for Grand Challenge and Local Challenge Fund. With that introduction, Dr. Mohamed Opal, please, if you can unmute and share your screen.
Thank you, Umar. So give me a minute or two. Let me just sort this out.
Sure.
All right. So I think you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Janji, thank you. Thank you, Umar. Thank you, HEC, for having me here. A warm welcome to everyone who's here. And I'm assuming I mean, I can be bilingual here. There's no international audience, right, Umar?
No, you can be. You can speak in Urdu.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'll switch back and forth. That makes my life easier, maybe a more informal discussion, if you will, as well. My name is Momin, as Umar suggested, as told you. I'm an associate professor of electrical engineering at LUMS. And I am the PI for the team GCF 521, which is titled, as you see on your screen, Creating Technological Foundations of Data-Driven Policymaking for Sustainable Urban Development. So what I've been asked to do by HEC is to share my experience, share our experiences in designing grand challenge projects or the LCA projects with particular reference to the theory of change. And how do we incorporate ideas from theory of change into designing our projects. And hopefully these experiences that I talk about, would be useful for some of you as well. Before I begin, I want to give some disclaimers here. The first disclaimer is I am not an expert on theory of change. I am an engineer by training, but we found the ideas useful, so just take that in that stride. Okay, I'm not an expert in theory of change, but I'm going to try to link the activities that we did in the design. How were they related to the ideas of theory of change as well? The second disclaimer is, I mean, what I speak are my own thoughts, which are not necessarily representative of the decision makers at HEC. I'm not on the reviewer panel. So, I mean, I'm just going to give an overview of something that worked for us. And I'm not saying that this is the right formula. This cannot be the formula, but everyone is going to find their own way through their design, depending on what area they're working in. But then, nevertheless, I think some of the experience, some of this information may be useful for some. All right. So with that, those disclaimers, let me begin. I'm going to try to not give you really an overview of what our project is about. लेकिन वो experiences क्योंकि share करने हैं, तो in when I'm trying to link the ideas from theory of change, so I may be actually talking about some of the things that we did. लेकिन उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि I'm publicizing and I'm just marketing our project as well, right? So I'm going to try to refrain from that, but if I do, so forgive me for that. All right, so what is theory of change? Theory of change, as some of you might know better than me, is a framework which you use to make sure that any initiative or any proposal that you put forth achieves a certain long-term goal that you envision, or a certain impact that you envision, a certain change that you want to bring about in the society. And it's a step-by-step process, which typically works backwards, right? And let's just outline what the steps are, which I've just mentioned the source here. So it starts out with identifying what the long-term goal is, right? So I would rather in identifying long-term goals ke bajay, I would say just identify one long-term goal or the change that you wish to bring about, right? So that's the overarching objective of what you want to do, of what you want to achieve. This is followed by backwards mapping and as you see on the screen, and identifying the conditions that must be satisfied to achieve the change that you want to bring about. And these conditions need to be necessary, and these conditions need to be sufficient. And so those conditions need to be identified. And along with those conditions, you typically connect outcomes. What are the outcomes that would achieve the right conditions to achieve the long-term goal that or the change that you want to bring about, right? This is followed by identifying and spelling out the basic assumptions about the context, and followed by then interventions, identifying the interventions that your initiative will perform so as to achieve the preconditions or the outcome framework that you've developed in step number 2. And then, of course, we need to have indicators to measure कि वाकई वो outcome achieve हुई या नहीं हुई, उसके KPIs क्या हैं, and to basically to assess the performance of your initiative. And this comes about while you're doing the initiative as well as while you're writing the proposal as well, just identifying what the indicators must be. And finally, because this is about designing grand challenges, all of you must be in the process of writing up the proposal as well, then writing up a narrative to explain the logic of your initiative, right? So these 6 points essentially serves as the outline of my session, outline of my talk. Having said that, I will not follow this religiously. There are some points that I may not be covering in a lot of detail, but nevertheless, some basic idea of how this session is going to proceed, right? Now, before I even do that, I mean, our own experiences. I mean, when we started out writing the proposal, everybody asks this question. I mean, why am I doing this? I mean, why should we even write this proposal? And of course, the sabse pehli baat jo aati hai, it's a big pot of money. And very, very frankly, I mean, people don't say it. It's a big pot of money. Must go for it, right? And as academics, and I'm assuming all of the people in the audience are academics as well. We want to advance our research agendas. We want to contribute scholarly work in the scientific community so that our own status in the scientific community elevates itself, right? So those are our motivation as well. But I think what the Grand Challenge is about, or the Grand Challenge Fund, or the Local Challenge Fund is about, and any challenges fund, I mean, whether that be in the US, whether that be in the UK, for example, GCRF, that's more about creating an impact. That's more about bringing about change. That's more about making a difference. So, I mean, that's the one thing that we really, really took to heart, that whatever we propose or whatever the activities we design have to make a difference. Have to make a difference. Whether that be societal, of course, that must be societal. And that difference could be academic as well. And the second point, which is the research agenda and the scholarly work, believe me, I mean, that would come about as a byproduct. So that's what our thinking process was when we started writing out the proposal. And then follow this up, ke karna kya hai? I mean, what actually is a good problem to pose in this call for proposals? And one of the key points that I mean, in our brainstorming sessions, we wrote down was, it must be grand challenge, of course, and that grand challenge must be for Pakistan. We want to solve Pakistan's problems, but not just Pakistan's problem. That challenge must be applicable to Pakistan and beyond, right? So it should not be just limited to Pakistan. What we develop must be recognized internationally as well, and must be in a position jahan pe, whether that be developing world, khas taur pe, those solutions could be exported there, and that would make a real difference as well. It must have room for academic contribution. So that was a precondition for us. I mean, when we were deciding what to do, what to write, and because we're all academics, so it has to have room for academic contribution. And of course, it must be linked to what my background is, or my professional training is, and my prior experiences. So these are the key precursors, if you will, or necessary things that what we do must satisfy. And then leading to this, I mean, the challenge that we really came up with was we wanted to address the runaway urbanization in Pakistan. And I don't want to talk about a lot in detail. Why is it important? That's not really important for this session. What is important is we came up with a list of keywords. Within, I mean, urbanization itself, I mean, problems in urban areas, it's such a huge canvas out there, and we can't really solve each and every one of those urban problems. So we want to stick with some limited or even if, I mean, it's limited. I say limited, but it's not limited. लेकिन जो scope है, उसको थोड़ा सा अगर narrow कर लें, so we identified these keywords. We want to focus on data. We want to focus on technology. It has to have machine learning. It has to have artificial intelligence, data decision making, evidence-based policy design. And could these areas be used to solve some of the problems that Pakistan urban spaces face? From these keywords, and then we focus when we realize here, urbanization is maybe too grand for us, really, really grand. So let's just narrow our focus to these three dimensions and sprawl, mobility, and environment health. So all of this took place even before writing down the proposal. I said this was all the titles. I mean, we wanted to come up with a one-line title to identify what we want to do. Now, after all of this brainstorming, we came up with a long-term goal, and this is how we went about this. Let's come up with a vision statement, if you would, right, which would help us drive the actual proposal writing process, right? And this was very, very carefully thought about, right? So the long-term goal that we said we wanted to solve was to have Pakistan to make commonplace the cutting-edge innovation in technology, as well as data decision-making for sustainable urban communities in Pakistan. And because it needs to be adopted, so we really, really wanted to incorporate other aspects which are non-technology based, which was KG innovation. Any innovation has to incorporate social aspects of transparency, of equity, of inclusivity, and acceptability. So this was a long-term goal. And then we said, yeah, this is the long-term goal. Project 3 saal ke project ki kya goal hai? That was actually leading up to the long-term goal, which was to promote whatever I just said, and which would ultimately lead down the line many, many years after the project duration of 3 years, and which is not the end, to adoption of those practices and make them widespread. Okay, so here's the goal, and this is where this theory of change actually comes in. Okay, we've identified the goal, and the goal is to whatever that statement that I gave you, right? And for each one of the proposals that you're writing, perhaps you could do this one-line statement or one-line goal and see कि उस goal को achieve करने के लिए what are the things that are necessary and sufficient to achieve that long-term goal. And this is what we identified. So I'm going to try to link those theory of change to specific illustrative example as it applies to our project. And of course, I mean, it would be different for each and every one of your projects as well, but this is just an illustrative example. So we said, okay, in order for this to take place, there needs to be an awareness of what technology can do in this space, what data-driven decision-making can do in this space. So there has to be awareness in there. There has to be capacity. It's not just us, it's the stakeholders, whether that be the government agencies, whether that they be the non-governmental agencies, whether that be academics. So we need to build capacity in the Pakistani circles who could innovate in technology, innovate in data-driven decision-making, in evidence-based policy design, right? So we have to have capacity. And then, of course, nothing can be done without innovation, because you have to have innovation, technological innovation, whether that be scientific innovation, whether that be technological innovation, that would be a precursor, or that would be a condition required to achieve this long-term goal. So these are the requirements that we identified. Now, I agree that this may not, these are necessary conditions, but may not necessarily be the sufficient conditions, but let's move from here, right? So if these are the three conditions we identified, the next job was, okay, yaar, what are the outcomes जो कि हम project के आखिर में हम बता सकें, which would create a situation or environment where these three requirements would be met. And so then it was mapping these requirements to a certain outcomes that we would want to achieve. Now it's going, so once again, it's working backwards. And these are the outcomes that we identified. We said, KG, we would want to develop technology for data collection, whether that be sensor networks, whether that be collection apps, whether that be automation solution for waste management, whether that be mobility tracking solutions or mobile sensor networks and so on and so forth. So there's going to be a focus on creating technological outcomes, innovation in technological, which is ultimately used for data collection. We said an outcome would be innovation in data-driven discovery. So cutting-edge methods, and essentially it's going to be algorithms to not only estimate, but to quantify, to analyze, and to predict spatio-temporal distribution of socioeconomic environmental health indicators of an urban space, right? And once again, this is working backwards. I mean, so before you write down the proposal, these are the outcomes we identify. This is what we want to achieve. And then we said, we need to have open data sets. And one of the things we identified was, there's a proprietary wall. I mean, people who are doing it, what they're doing right now in the urban space, there's a proprietary wall behind what they're doing. We don't want to be like that. We want to be open and open for business, in not the literal sense, but open for the business of creating an impact. So we want to collect data. Whatever data we collect on our own, we're going to make that publicly available, and so through open data sets. So that is a specific outcome. We said, this is going to be used to create those conditions, those necessary requirements. And then we said, we want to develop software tool sets as well, which is ultimately going to build capacity in the sense some dashboards or tool sets that could be used by stakeholders and researchers to carry out complex data-driven activities and without being experts in machine learning or AI as ourselves. So we want to translate that into something that works for a layman, if you will, right? And then there has to be, because there's a focus is on capacity building, on awareness. So a big focus of our outcomes. So we said this must be an outcome as well. We must have curriculum design. We must work with the executive development centers, whether that be at LUMS or whether that be at some other organizations that we may engage with. We must conduct training workshops for the relevant stakeholders, and then these dissemination and dialogue workshops. I mean, we have to talk. We have to disseminate whatever we're doing and whatever others are doing. So this was one of the outcomes that we said, this must be built into in the outcome framework as well. And finally, the publications, the policy papers, the policy briefs, which is actually related to dissemination as well, and which is enabled for sectoral partners as well as dissemination works. So the idea is, so you have the goal that we wanted to achieve. You उसको गोल को अचीव करने के लिए रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या क्या चाहिए मुझे, और उन रिक्वायरमेंट्स को क्रिएट करने के लिए these are the specific outcomes that we want, and these could be actually mapped to each and every one of those requirements. So these data-driven discovery or technology or tool sets, these are going to be used. These are used to create innovation, and of course awareness as well, because when you showcase कि ये कुछ हो सकता है, so that creates awareness as well. So there's a mapping process of each and every one of those outcomes to the conditions, and so on and so forth. And then that's working backwards. You specify indicators. How do you assess whether your outcomes would or have been able to achieve what you were promising to achieve? And then we categorized multiple levels of indicators. These were the results that were achieved in the project scope, whether that be the solution that we're developing or the tool sets. How many stakeholders have we engaged? Who have we engaged with? What is the nature of those engagements? What is the uptake of the solution that we developed? The capacity building, how many workshops that we did, किस को engage किया, किस को train किया, human resource कितना mentor किया है, data sets कितने publicly available किया, and so on and so forth. So knowledge transfer, कितनी publications हैं, policy briefs कितने आए हैं, कितनी policies change हुई हैं, impact assessment कितनी हुई हैं, and so on and so forth. So all of those indicators were built into the framework as well. So this is just a screenshot of one of the figures that we did. I think maybe I'll skip over this. So the work packages kya hai? I think I don't want to go into those lot of details. each one of those work packages, KPI layers, किस type में है exactly, income outcomes क्या होंगे, impacts क्या होंगे. So perhaps I'm going to skip over this. Now, one of the important things we try to incorporate into the narrative or into the proposal writing and into our thinking process. So this year's abhi tak sara thinking process chal raha hai, was ke, and I think this is what Athar Osama also, when we were attending these similar workshops like the one that we're having here. I mean, one of the things that Athar Osama said really stuck with me at least, which was ke, the project just does not end after 3 years. I mean, you have to have a long-term plan. कि 3 साल के बाद, I mean, आपने क्या कर देंगे जो maybe अगले 10 साल के बाद change लेके आएगा. And so that's why we wanted to, so we specifically discuss these pathways to impact, as we call them. And I think this pathways to impact is a term that is derived from the UK's the proposal that I've seen, GCRF wale. Usme they have actually specifically used this, they required proposals to include this pathways to impact. कि आपने क्या कर लिया है, इसको आगे impact किस तरह होगा. And this we incorporate into our thought process as well, and then of course into the narrative as well. So we had a separate section on pathways to impact, and then we identify क्या चीजें हम कर रहे हैं जिसकी वजह से we feel कि there is going to be a long-term impact, and we said कि जी sectoral partnerships अभी हैं, or I mean there's going to be a strong focus on cementing those. There's a transdisciplinary approach in the sense that we're not just engineers, we're not just technologists working on developing cutting-edge innovation, but because we want to have this adopted by the ultimate stakeholders. So I mean, there's a lot that goes on into between development and adoption. So we wanted to have that transdisciplinary approach where the design of the innovation itself is actually driven by factors which are social in nature, which are economic in nature, and so on and so forth. So we have this transdisciplinary team. This means technology adoption ke experts hain. So we said this is one of the ways we feel the things that we develop are going to have a long-term impact. We said championing or creating champions in data-driven practices. This is going to create a long-term impact. Open data, as mentioned earlier, we said this is a pathway to impact. And the showcasing some of the pilot projects, the impact of pilot projects that we do during the 3-year duration. Not only do we implement them, we analyze them, and then we do an impact assessment to showcase what can technology really deliver. I mean, what are the benefits, material benefits, if you will, and social benefits and economic benefits of such an initiative. And of course, technology for socioeconomic development, which is sort of related to transdisciplinary approach. Socioeconomic factors must be incorporated into the technology development. So the bottom line is, we consciously incorporated this into the narrative as well. This is not just a 3-year project. This is, I mean, we're just asking for the seed, if you will, to create this long-term impact. Now, all of this brainstorming ke baad, then we started writing the narrative. And that narrative was, I mean, that exercise that I just mentioned was extremely useful in the sense that brainstorming karne ke baad, then we had a clear picture of what the narrative should be. Using those outcomes, those requirements, we were able to list down the specific objectives that we listed. And I've listed here, I don't want to read through them because I think that won't help you. And then once we listed these objectives, driven by what that theory of change exercise was, we wanted to put the team together, right? So that was a very, very important part. And I would actually be lying if I said, "Ke, yaar, this is really how it went about in the sense that ye humne karna hai, और इस करने के लिए हमें ये बंदे चाहिए, इस तरह के बंदे चाहिए." I mean, frankly speaking, and I'm very frank and open here, it was an iterative process. I mean, we said कि ये बंदे चाहिए, ये बंदे इस तरह के मिल रहे हैं, किस तरह के नहीं मिल रहे, and then it went back, and so there was sort of an iterative process, but there was a top-down approach in the sense that these are the disciplines or requisite disciplinary expertise that we would need to achieve the long-term goal. And let's just look for experts in this area. So And we've been lucky to find people, I mean, all over in all disciplines. So we have about, I think, 11 PIs in total across 2 universities, and which cover all of these very diverse set of expertise, which has already been a very, very rich experience. I mean, we're two months into the execution, and then just discussion. एक engineer जब economics के बंदे से बात कर रहा होता है, so I mean that has led me to learn a lot, and I'm hoping it's the other way around as well. So that's how we put the team together. And then the team together is also a stakeholder map, right? So and for that, I mean, once again, this was also an iterative process. So we first said कि end users को ये sectoral stakeholders हैं, let's try to bin them. Okay, what is the nature of the stakeholder engagement would we need to achieve the long-term goal? So we said we would need stakeholders who would help us in creating linkages with policymakers, and we need policymakers as well as stakeholders. We would need stakeholders who would help us develop policy guidelines. We may need stakeholders who would provide us with technical expertise that we may be lacking, who would share data with us, and that's an important set of stakeholders. अभी तक सारे के सारे यहाँ पे ही काम चल रहा है in the first 2 months. And of course, some of them might be end users as well. And in our experience, the data sharing bin and the end user bin is a strong overlap between the two. And this is a list of this, not important. And then from all of that, there was a research plan that we tried to devise, a methodology. Umar, how am I doing on time?
Fine, Mohamed, so you can take another 5-10 minutes if you need.
All right, so I should be done soon.
By 7, yeah, latest.
Okay, all right. So and this is how we put the. So I just have 5 or 10 minutes more. Put the research, all of the research plan together, and we divided it once again into bins. Okay, there has to be verticals that we focus on. I mean, we can't just say, yeah, this is a broad objective that we want to achieve, data driven. I mean, there has to be some application areas, if you will, right, which would help us illustrate through those applications. So we identified those applications. We identified 6 applications, which we call them verticals. But all of the activities, which we call them horizontals, were actually driven by the specific objectives that I highlighted earlier. And there's a mapping that we can actually do, and this was the thought process as well. कि वो जो specific objectives हैं, वो in activities के the horizontals को drive करेंगे. And the specific objectives, by the way, were being driven by the outcomes from the theory of change framework that I mentioned earlier. So, I mean, this is just a glimpse into what our thought process was when we started writing the narrative. So this is the narrative that we work with, or सारा के सारा explain इसी के ऊपर किया. And then project horizontals, how do we integrate the research plan? I think this is, maybe I've skipped over those. One final point here, maybe a tip, if you will, which I think was useful for us, is just the picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is just one of those pictures that we included for one of the verticals. And after including this, we did not need to say a lot in the text itself. I think this was, we just, for each and every one of the things, we try to map what are the kind of technologies that we would want to use, what is the kind of data that we want to collect. This would flow into some of the things that we're developing, which would go into Open Data Pakistan, the analytics tool, and the outcomes that we want to achieve, the illustrative examples of what we could do with this data analytics. And there's lots and lots of, you look at a proposal, lots and lots of figures, just trying to illustrate the methodology of what we want to achieve. Okay, so with that, I will conclude. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being patient to listening to me. I put up my email address in the beginning as well, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions that people may have. So just feel free to send me an email, and I will try to respond to the best of my ability.
Sure. We will also have Dr. Momin Q&A session. Our third presenter, Dr. Sarosh Lodhi, is not able to attend today's session, so I'm going to be filling in his stead. I'll take another 15-20 minutes to go through my presentation, and then we'll start a Q&A session. If perhaps you are able to stay for another 15-20 minutes, there may be some live questions that we may need to respond. Thank you so much. So, right. Like Dr. Mohamed Opal, I need to make a few disclaimers also. I'm neither a doctor, neither I'm a economist, neither I'm an expert in theory of change. I just happen to have implemented several social sector development projects and, learned by doing what needs to be done in designing these programs and implementing these programs. So I'll just take you through my journey of what I've learned in my last 7-8 years of implementing these projects. One of the projects I recently designed, it's the Agriculture Scaling Up Program for Income and Rural Employment, ASPIRE. And under that, we've launched the first leg of it, which is Apiculture Scaling Up Program for Income and Rural Employment. So I'll also bring some references from that program design, how we were able to build the intervention logic and logical framework, and what were the steps that we carried out in designing that entire program. So like Dr. Mohamed Opal explained, theory of change is an ongoing process of reflection to explore change and how it happens, and what that means in a particular context, sector, and or group of people. There are many different terms that are being used for theory of change, pathway of change, engine of change, blueprint, logic model, and theory of action. Ultimately, all these things refer to the same thing. We must differentiate between theory of change, which is usually at a strategic level, from logical framework, which drills down deeper at the granular level into the implementation level also. Assumptions refer to conditions that need to be realized in order for change to happen, including your work. So TOC thinking is basically a structured way of thinking about change and impact projects that projects would like to achieve. A causal hypothesis, a basic question that we all must ask: how do I expect results to be achieved? The answer is quite self-explanatory here. If inputs and activities produce outputs, this should lead to outcomes, which will ultimately contribute to a goal. And it's often helpful if you start with the goal, if you start with an objective, what you're trying to achieve, and then work backwards, as was explained by Dr. Mohamed Opal also in his presentation. Main questions that you need to ask when you're designing and when you're at the early stage of designing a program or thinking about what you need to do is, what is really the program? What outcomes does the program aims to achieve? What intermediate steps lead to those outcomes? What assumptions are associated with each link in the causal chain? As you go about this thinking process, perhaps you will be able to answer some of the questions that we earlier asked. And finally, last but not least, you need to have indicators that you can measure for outcomes and ultimately the long-term objectives and goals that we call the impact. The building blocks, one needs to discuss what is the whole result-based chain. So in this entire result-based chain, you have inputs, output, outcomes, and ultimately impact. And at each level, you need to define those indicators that you will be able to measure and monitor over a period of time. What would you choose for your work? Can you achieve these? Can you attribute these to your work? You need to ask these questions from yourself when you're designing this project, whether it's something that is even doable within your area of expertise and within the resources that are available to you in that particular grant funding. Also, it is very important for the program design to be relevant. How do you assess relevance? In my recent visit to universities, I realized that a lot of universities are choosing research topics and research designs without really understanding the needs of the society or the industry to whom they're going to feed that research. So, it often helps if one maps out who's the target audience, who will be benefiting from that research, from that project, and whether that target audience actually needs that research, if you can do some kind of initial testing or sounding from the target market, perhaps some focus group discussions or key informed interviews, if not a structured questionnaire, that can always help. Social political content is also very, very important, and ultimately potential threats and challenges that can hold you from achieving those outcomes. These are some things that one needs to plan for as you're doing the program design for your research project. Assumptions are very critical, right? So, I mean, when you build this entire result-based chain, there are many assumptions you have to take, and realization of assumptions will ultimately guide you whether you'd be able to take the next step or not. So inputs that you bring to the project could be your essentially application or device or the environment that you operate in. What are your assumptions so that chain can move to the next stage? Discuss what you're doing, what assumptions would apply, what assumptions won't apply for theory of change. Can you measure those assumptions? So these are some things that you have to think about, and we'll go into a case study and we'll look at how I've been able to do that for my project also. The uses and considerations in theory of change, programming approaches are secondary. They respond to the hypotheses and the goal you seek to achieve. You also have to define how well the assumptions need to be met for the next step to occur, which are the pathways that we also need to understand. What are the pathways that can ultimately lead to impact that Dr. Mohamed Opal was also talking about. Theory of change requires that your indicators are identified and are measurable. TOC helps you develop your program. Ultimately, when you have that framework, that skeleton in place, you can move into building teams and writing the narrative and designing the program. It doesn't work the other way around, that you've designed the program and then you're working on the theory of change. TOC lets you measure success of your program during and after implementation, M&E, impact assessment, etc. So this thinking, you know, because this is the starting point, and then you are able to build a team and through an iterative process, design a program and build your narrative. So working on this logical framework at the very start becomes very critical, that you are able to think about all the steps that you need to think about to ensure that ultimately your interventions lead to that immediate outcome and also the long-term impact. The hypothesis formation, start with a goal, what outcome you want to achieve, outline programming assumptions, and then ultimately draw a map of how these assumptions lead to the outcome of interest, and then start working and building teams and the narrative around it. The assumptions are more, you know, generally if you have a framework in place and you've defined KPIs, it becomes very easy to monitor them and measure them over a period of time. Assumptions allow one to measure progress while the project is being implemented. Ideally, one would measure outcomes or even impact, but that is often expensive, difficult, or both. Right? I mean, when you talk about impact is a very sort of complicated thing, right? I mean, for example, I did my undergrad from a business school. So there was an immediate outcome, which is it enhanced my knowledge, but then there was a long-term impact, and I'm still till date realizing that impact, right? Or delivering that impact in whatever I'm doing. So impact has to be measured over a much longer period of time. And you know, so you cannot at any given, right after implementing the project, you start measuring impact, it becomes very tricky. I mean, you need to take a long-term view of how you measure that impact. And this only works if your TOC is realistic. It actually connects the assumptions to outcomes. So if your TOC is not a realistic, logical framework, ultimately this will break somewhere and not give you the right output. What are the good indicators? Quantitative and qualitative. Standard of comparison, baseline versus endline, defining high quality, etc. Yeah. So when you're choosing indicators, you need to keep this acronym in mind: SMART. Specific, ask, answer one question at a time. Measurable, quantifiable, accurate, unbiased, sensitive. Achievable, is this impact realistic? Are the goals attainable? Relevant, is this the most relevant program indicator given the needs? Time bound, has boundaries, what's the deadline? So, you know, whenever you choose KPIs for whether input, output, outcome, or impact, you need to keep these acronyms in mind and then choose those indicators accordingly. So theory of change levels. So when we look at input program activities, what exactly is input, right? So program activities, what we do as a part of the program, deliver, teach, offer loans, etc. What are the resources used funds, staff, equipment, curriculum, all materials. These could perhaps be your input into your theory of change. Then what exactly is output? Output is really the tangible products or services produced as a result of the activities usually can be counted. Immediate, intermediate outcomes, short-term behavioral changes that result from the outputs, preventive health habits, usage of tablets, etc., etc. And goal or long-term impact, it's the long-term changes that result from the outcomes, the result of the program, and something that was explained very nicely by Dr. Mohamed Opal in his Pathways to Impact. So now I'm coming to my case study, this agriculture scaling up program for income and rural employment, essentially a village growth acceleration program, in which the objectives were given to me by the Ministry of Science Technology, by the minister himself. And the task was basically, how do we utilize all of the knowledge, R&D and technologies that we have across all our universities and other R&D organizations for transforming our agriculture sector. And so I was given this task, and I started working backwards. So ultimately, the idea was that when we go into the agriculture sector, we need to take a combination of interventions. We can't just take one intervention and expect to achieve the outcomes or the impact that was expected, or perhaps the goals targets that were given to me by the Ministry of Science. So access to market, developing market linkages, market structures as outgrowths, cooperatives, giving skills and building capacity, giving access to finance, giving access to information, access to energy, a whole host of things, access to water, because agriculture essentially, cross-cuts with lots of other issues, right? You can't, if you were to transform a small rural community into a thriving, agri-based economy, in that, if you want to accelerate the economy, agriculture economy in that rural community, then you need to ensure that you have access to all these things available to that community, and that you're able to understand what are the indigenous resources that we're trying to harness. And if we are able to, build the right capacity at the right skills, give that community access to the markets that they need, give them access to finance, organize, the markets into cooperatives or in any other, structures that perhaps will, enable them to take the product from farm to fork by adding value at different stages. And to add value, you also need access to energy, and then access to water is also very critical in agriculture. So we had to take all these different considerations in mind as we went about designing this program. The smart project setup and intervention logic essentially required us to set up a project coordination unit, and then look down and look at different components and subcomponents and service categories and target groups. Who are we trying to serve and what are we trying to do? So we this is really the implementation plan that we put together. There were some cross-cutting issues that we had to look at. We had to assign who are the responsible parties. Once we had to define what cross-cutting issues we were targeting and what activities we were performing to target those cross-cutting issues, it became easy for us to define who are the parties. In your case, you're not building this national level program. You're just doing a research project design for GCF. So you don't need to look at, ministries and government institutions, but the thinking is very similar, right? So the thinking you have to do is very similar while you're building teams and consortia for your project. Like Dr. Mohamed Opal explained, as you develop that entire framework, it becomes very clear, who's going to perform which activity and what kind of skills you need, what kind of experience you need, or what kind of capacity you need to achieve those outputs and ultimately outcomes from those activities. Yeah. So then you're able to assign responsibilities, draw a timeline. Once you have a timeline and you know exactly what kind of a level of effort you require from each one of those responsible parties, then you can, start developing budgets and then start writing narrative around it. It becomes very, very easy. When we specifically look at the case of apiculture, we went and defined very specific objectives, and we developed indicators which were following the SMART methodology of acronyms of indicators. So in this particular case, if you look at the objective indicator 3.1, kilogram price of centrifuge purified honey is raised by 20% in main harvesting season. Objective indicator 3.2, organized production of wax, royal jelly, pollen, etc. FOB value increased by 20%. It's very specific. So we're not leaving anything for imagination for the review panel, right? So we are very focused on what we are trying to achieve. So the more focused you are, the more specific your project design would be, and then you can start designing your interventions accordingly to achieve those objectives. Now, to achieve these objectives, we define some outputs, some results. In the case of apiculture, if you look at result 3.1, what we're trying to achieve is quality of marketable honey is increased. And the indicator here is the moisture level of marketable honey is lower than 18%. You know, this is very important, right? In the case of honey, if you want to be able to connect to international markets, their export standards and certifications that you need to have. And for example, German standards are the most stringent standards, which require you to maintain moisture at about 17%. So we kept that around 18% for that reason. Then to achieve those outputs, we define several activities and interventions. And in those activities and interventions, you see activity 3.11, plant indigenous bee forages, shrubs, trees, etc., and map existing fauna and flora. I mean, most countries would have mapped their fauna and flora. In Pakistan, the biggest our challenge when we were designing this program was we had no idea where, you know, what kind of fauna and flora existed in Pakistan that was conducive to supporting apiculture. So mapping all of that, and then this program was developed within the Billion Tree program. So we wanted to give a list of all the plantations that perhaps the government needs to do across all provinces, so that you know, this apiculture scaling up program could be implemented nationwide and opportunities could be created for beekeepers in every province. And organizing women to fabricate quality protective cloth, packaging, and other materials required in the value chain, facilitate the finance of motorized wax foundation, mold for modern hives. You know, these activities were designed for a reason, because in the state of apiculture in Pakistan, we are using very sort of obsolete equipment and techniques. And over a period of time, what we've realized is that our national output for honey has gone down from almost 40,000 metric ton to 10,000 metric ton. And that has also been, as a result, a byproduct of systematic deforestation. And climate change is a real and present danger for Pakistan, right? So we need, and apiculture, you know, it's a classic triple bottom line activity. While it has tremendous economic impact on those who are actually involved in this value chain, for the country which is promoting this program, it lifts the bottom of the pyramid. It's very inclusive, as opposed to, for example, the sugar industry with a sugar farmer, you know, who's providing a sugarcane farmer. You know, over the last 78 years since Pakistan was formed, he's at the same level as he was perhaps when Pakistan was created. In this particular case, we have created a model which is very inclusive, right? So, and there's a complete farm to fork model, and there's a cost input, and there's an output price that we pay for honey. And this entire margin is spread evenly with all those actors who are involved in taking that product to the end market. So the capitalist putting money is not taking the cream, or those at the top end of the value chain are not exploiting those at the bottom end. And I'll explain the framework later. But those were the kind of motivations and objectives that were behind designing and defining these objectives, and then designing the interventions that will help us achieve those objectives. So, and then we wanted this to be inclusive. So the current techniques that we use, for example, the traditional hives that we use, are not I mean, they're not customized to our climatic changes. And those who are doing apiculture using that equipment, they have I mean, a lot of their bees and colonies, they die during certain seasons, and if the weather is not supporting them. So we were able to design, based on some R&D activity from the universities who are involved in this space, we were able to identify some designs to a challenge. We engaged some of the researchers, and then we were able to convert that design into a product. And we recently piloted those products in 5 sites that included the President's house, the Prime Minister's house, and offices, and as well as you know, the SAPM Ministry of Climate Change, his facility in Attak and Kalachitta and Padri near Jhelum. So we identified those sites and we implemented with these modern equipment, and we collected some results. Later on, there's some other activities: identify and procure required technologies for precision apiculture, develop lab equipment and technology to produce wood frame hives, integrate research development institutions in quality improvement, establish training measures in quality. So, and there were other activities that we defined for each one of the results that we wanted to achieve. Ultimately, we also wanted to improve our export economy, export of non-honey product, and also honey is not just the only byproduct of this entire apiculture intervention. There are 9 byproducts. Honey itself is a royal product. It has a good price and a very good margin. For those who are involved in this business, they understand this is a very, very lucrative business. But most don't realize that honey is just one of the 9 byproducts, and other 9 byproducts perhaps are even more lucrative. So idea was to build the capability in some of the other non-honey products as well. For example, royal jelly, propolis, pollen, beeswax, venom. Venom has many pharmaceutical applications. Royal jelly, by the way, is considered to be liquid gold. Pakistan, you won't find it. Authentic royal jelly. Royal jelly is something that's found in the glands of these bees, honeys in their stomach. And if you feed royal jelly to a queen, to a bee for 5 days, their ability to procreate becomes increases exponentially, and they convert into a queen. Ultimately, they're able to create their own colonies. So there's the complete process. There's a complete process of how you do quality queen rearing, identify those bees who have the ability to produce more honey, and then you feed them royal jelly, and then you incubate them and you build their colonies. So there's a complete process, and it's a very scientific process. It's very easy to rear your livestock, your goats, your cows, but the process to rear queens is very scientific. So we wanted to engage our academia into all of this activity, and then extracting venom or royal jelly. It's a very scientific process also, and you need quite advanced lab infrastructure. So that is also something that we planned in this entire program, developing Pakistan's first standardization formulation lab that later we wanted to replicate across Pakistan in all the PCSIR and NARC facilities. So this is, I'm just giving you, getting into the details of this project design, because as you design your project, it would be very, very useful if you also go into this level of detail, define your objectives, your results and outputs, and then the activities and inputs that you want to perform, and then assign roles and responsibilities, draw out a timeline, and give indicators, KPIs at every stage of the theory of change or result-based change that are smart, that you can measure, that are time-bound, so on and so forth. So in the case of Aspire, the objective was that from conception to embryo, we wanted to create a multi-actor network, which was new high-potential B2B value chain, focused on basic enabling sector requirements, reducing risk, or providing opportunities. Some quick wins for businesses, sector associations emerging. Typical support is general facilitation, broking, training, and finance for interventions was planned at this stage. And then the next stage, the idea was to develop some sustainable business models. And what we decided was, on one side, we will identify beekeepers in the market who've been doing beekeeping, and through a NAFTEC recognition of prior learning, we will do an assessment and certify them. Those who are certified, we will connect them to subsidized sources of financing under Kamyab Jawan, 5 lakh of interest-free loans. We would transfer them 20 modern beehives as a starter package, with buyback agreements under one company that was created. Initially, I was pushing the government to establish that company, but establishing these companies under government is a challenge. So we then were able to get private sector to set up one of these companies. And then many other bigger players also were interested to get into this space. So the idea was, on one side, to create a pipeline of certified beekeepers who are operating at the production level, and then bring some private sector entities at the processing end who would give buyback arrangements. Those beekeepers who take the starter package are able to return the finance, or they will be able to perhaps get more funding from banks and increase their modern hives from 20 to 40 to 60 to 80. Anyone who's participating in this program after receiving 20 hives it's a 1 month certification after which they get the financing, and they immediately after getting the hives, they can start producing honey, and they don't need to worry about where they need to sell because they have buyback arrangements. So really, I mean, after 1 month certification with 20 hives, the cash flow that we have developed for this guides us that they can start earning up to 40,000 a month income, which is quite reasonable. And after 6 months or 1 year, when they pay back that loan and double up their hives, they can double up their income and they continue to grow. Those who perform will get more funding and will continue to grow. Those who don't perhaps will be filtered out. And so the business model, this was the overall business model, that we didn't want to rely on government funding to support this activity. We wanted government to kickstart with subsidy because generally our banks are not usually very keen, or I mean, even the banks struggle with what we call cash flow based lending techniques. Banks are doing what we call lazy banking, providing collateral based lending, and to encourage them to come out of their comfort zone and get into a new market. Giving that startup package, getting the subsidy was important. So this was the overall business plan that we ultimately wanted to achieve. And finally, And finally, the idea was once we have built the market structures and prepared the market actors, we wanted to ensure that sufficient volume was coming out and export readiness was also achieved at the processing end, so that we could link these to the international markets in Middle East, in China, in Europe, where there's a huge demand for honey and honey byproducts. There's a honey sort of revolution, apiculture revolution going on globally because of the climate change issues. And apiculture economics, I'm not going to get into it today, but what I would like to say is that bee, where it picks up the nectar, it also pollinates. And research has shown that, especially in case of citrus or edible crops, edible oil crops, it significantly improves the yields, almost up to 30 even more percent increase in these crops. So in the case of citrus, it reduces your input costs. You don't have to use pesticides. You can use apiculture. You can use bees and do organic farming, and at the same time increase your yields. So it's a win-win situation. While delivering impact, you reverse the climate change. You bring your community to healthy living, move them away from sugar and sugar-based products. Right now, honey is very expensive. Not very many people can afford it because the supply is very low. But once you scale up a program at the national level and start producing at this level, then you would be able to bring the price down and more people can afford it. You can, get into value-added stuff and cosmetics and confectionery and candies, and move your community to a healthier living. So these were some thought processes that went behind in designing this program. And by the way, Pakistan won the Champion of Nature award in Davos because of the Billion Tree and the Billion Tree Honey program that we designed for the Prime Minister. Interventions, activities, outcomes, we've talked about these. Improve BDS as business development services, access to finance, improve market linkages, increase in R&D and innovation that feeds into the value chain at different nodes. Ultimately, the long-term impact, increased livelihoods of producers and farmers through enhanced exports, especially in high-end markets. This is the long-term impact. This cannot be achieved immediately, and it's a 3-year program. We perhaps may start seeing some impact in 3 years by the time we're done with 3 years, but impact generally is something that is measured over a much longer period of time. So these are some thoughts that I wanted to share. We have 3 sessions planned on your research project design and theory of change, logical framework. And my request to all of you for the next session, if you can do a similar exercise, go look at your research design and start developing a logical framework. So perhaps we can have a more iterative, interactive sort of session where we can take more questions from you. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end of it. You will be able to ask questions from all the panelists, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. But before that, I want to share one more So this is the logical framework and monitoring and evaluation framework that was developed. So इसमें अगर आप देखते हैं हमारा जो impact है, we are working backwards. So The impact that we've defined in the result chain is increased livelihood of producers and farmers to enhance exports, especially in high-end markets. This is for the broader program, the agriculture scaling up program for income and rural employment. Apiculture scaling up is a subset of that program. And then we go down and we look at outcomes. Local BDS, business development service providers and producers have increased their ability to provide better services. But then when you look at these indicators on the other side, they're very specific, right? So what do we need? 100 private extension workers, consultants, logistics operators, government officials from SMEDA, TDAP, et cetera. Number of beneficiaries reporting improved international competitiveness. As you go down and you look at outputs for outcome one, analysis of relevant value chains conducted and market opportunities identified. Initially when you're building a logical framework, whatever comes to your mind, start putting it in. And then over a period of time, you can start refining and see what is possible within the budget, within the resources available to you. But in this particular case, we wanted to carry out workshops. We wanted to target a certain number of participants, out of which we wanted certain participants to be a certain fraction to be female participants, advisory services to be provided, roadmaps to be achieved, consultations to have taken place, and so on and so forth. And then questions and means for verification. So that is very critical, because in any project, if you don't build an M&E framework upfront, and you don't ask your questions, how you would be able to go back and verify, and what would be your means of verification for those indicators, then it becomes a theoretical exercise if you have no way of collecting data or measuring that data or verifying that data. Yeah. So these things have to be thought out, and so building coming from inputs into outcomes and then outputs, and then ultimately your activities. That's the sort of logical process that I typically follow in developing logical frameworks for my programs that I've done in the last few years. So I think, and I'm happy to share more information on logical frameworks and the work I've done in various sectors. So feel free to reach out to me over email. But I think with this, I would like to now end my session and start the Q&A. So if there's any specific questions from anyone of you, we can take that. Ji. So Ahad, Noman, if there are any questions in the chat window, you can perhaps go through that list. Anyone has any questions from any one of the panelists, perhaps you can raise your hand and we can take those questions.
There is one question. I have a question. What if you are a PhD scholar, is it possible to work on a GCF LCF project and at the same time earn a PhD for the research you're doing?
The eligibility criteria for each one of our grants is very, it is on our HSC website, and I encourage everyone to go look at the requirements for the PIs, principal investigators, and co-principal investigators. If you're not, I mean, it's not just that you have your PhD. And in the last session, we also talked about that. You're talking about grand challenges, and if your PI has just gotten his PhD, in this particular case, I see that you have not achieved your PhD also, but you don't have the experience, then the reviewers will perhaps penalize you. And I'm not a reviewer, and neither I am on the review panel, but I can share my feedback that here you need to put your best foot forward. And if you're looking to solve a grand challenge, then you need to identify a PI that perhaps has got several years of experience post PhD. And those things are looked at favorably by the reviewers as they review your application. But that's my view, and I would like my other panelists, Dr. Mohamed Opal and Dr. Yasir, to also perhaps respond to this question if they would. Yeah.
So I think the question may have been, can you work on your research as a PhD scholar related to a GCF project? And the answer is yes, but as a PhD scholar, not of course as a PI.
अच्छा, उसमें जो दूसरा पॉइंट है डॉक्टर साहब, अगर आप पीएचडी स्टूडेंट हैं जिन्होंने क्वेश्चन पूछा है और उसके अलावा यू वांट टू वर्क ऑन अ जीसीएफ प्रोजेक्ट, तो विद द परमिशन ऑफ योर सुपरवाइजर आप एक टाइम जो है वो 20%, 30%, 40%, सो यू कैन एलोकेट टू द जीसीएफ प्रोजेक्ट, और पीआई जो है वो आपको हायर करेंगे उसमें.
Ji, so that's correct. That's absolutely correct, Dr. Yasser. So
We have
the
a
summary is,
raised hand by Mr. Aslam Malik.
Ji, Aslam sir. Please unmute
Uh,
yourself.
Sir, I'm thankful to you for this very splendid session and for being the part of this team. Sir, I have two or three questions. First of all, can we get any training workshop to learn and get the skills of making a project proposal according to the HEC criteria and the donors SOPs or TORs? Number one. Number two, sir, I want to ask a question about the impact assessment. You have used the word impact assessment, sir. I'm not clear about it. So I want to make some clarification from your side, sir. And third one is, sir, I'm sorry, I'm making three questions, sir. Sir, can you share any project relating to education and challenges being faced by the education sector in Pakistan? I'm a PhD scholar in Khaja Farid University of Engineering and Information Technology, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Three questions, three panelists. I'll let my colleague take their pick. I'm happy to respond to all three, but would like Dr. Momin and Dr. Yasser to perhaps.
So perhaps, Omar, you can address the impact assessment question. I mean, I think your presentation was very much inclined towards that.
Yeah. So impact assessment, generally, it's a standard practice in any donor-funded project, any donor-funded intervention. Impact assessments are done over a period of time, right? So in your particular case, you need to do a research design, and you need to, in your research design, include a monitoring and evaluation framework. But really, impact assessment is something that you're not required or responsible to do. So impact assessment requires, and third parties are usually hired to do that. If you have implemented a project and that project is intended to achieve certain outcomes and impact over a period of time, then after a certain number of years, or perhaps after the end of that project, a third party is engaged generally to carry out that impact assessment. So I hope that's sufficient response to your question. How you carry out impact assessment, that's a different question, and perhaps not in the.
Thank you, sir. I got it, sir.
जी, the first question आपका जो था.
जी, I got it, sir.
जी, आपने तीन क्वेश्चन पूछे थे.
जी, sir. Now the second question, sir.
जी, दूसरा क्वेश्चन क्या था आपका?
सर, ये था कि हम ट्रेनिंग हासिल कर सकते हैं, कोई वर्कशॉप हो सकती है इस सिलसिले में कि हम प्रोजेक्ट डिजाइनिंग के लिए जो HEC के क्राइटेरिया के मुताबिक हो और डोनर्स जो हैं उसको उनके TOR या SOPs के मुताबिक हो. जी,
तो लास्ट ईयर हमने जो वेबिनार सीरीज शुरू की थी, डॉक्टर अथर, I had just joined the first day. We had the first session for GCF. So that was essentially a kind of a training webinar series that was kind of designed by Dr. Zain and Dr. Athar. Unfortunately, both are not thus in HSC, and neither is our chairman, who was behind the design of this entire program. And GCF and LCF and TTSF and ISF are 4 funds that I've designed within component 1. There are 7 other components. So we are also struggling with a lot of capacity issues within HSC, and essentially taking a solo flight and doing this webinar series for all of you, so that you can do whatever we can do whatever we can to lift your capacity of proposals and have a better chance of funding all of you this year. But as part of component 1, I developed many RFPs, and this workshop was actually supposed to happen in a workshop. This actual session that we're having with you was supposed to happen in a workshop format, and we were supposed to start it 4 months back, so that we build sufficient skills and at the right time for you to have enough time to take those skills and translate those skills into improved proposals. Procurement is a major challenge in HSC, and we're not able to procure anything anymore for the last 1 year. So unfortunately, and deadlines for GCF and LCF are around the corner. Even if we organize a workshop for you after the awards are given, it defeats the purpose. But nonetheless, we, as things improve and we have the capacity and ability to procure, we have already designed a workshop format and a program for you in which we wanted to build capacity of researchers across Pakistan. When it happens, if that happens, there's a question mark on it. Yeah. Last question आपका जो था education के हवाले से, education, I mean ये थोड़ा soft topic हो जाएगा. हमारा मकसद यहाँ पे कोई आपको specific ideas देना नहीं है, वो तो आपका काम है. You need to go out and understand what kind of challenges exist in different sectors. Education is a vast field, and we have many out-of-school kids. I mean, primary level, secondary level, higher education. So there are different levels. You have different challenges. You need to go and understand what challenges are out there that you are looking to solve, right? And I mean, we can take it offline, and I can share. We're dealing with many startups who are coming up with many different innovative ideas, and so I can share what is happening in edtech and education space as far as innovation and addressing some of these challenges and problems, but perhaps not a core focus of today's discussion. Yeah.
Umar, I
sir,
would like to add,
I'm-
in fact, to Aslam साहब, in fact ये चीजें कोई इतनी complicated नहीं हैं. तो अगर आप HEC की वेबसाइट से जो फाइनेंशियल रूल्स हैं दे आर अवेलेबल, बहुत सिंपल है, उनको डाउनलोड कर लें. प्रपोजल को 2 से 3 दफा पढ़ेंगे, जो ड्राफ्ट ऑलरेडी दिया गया, तो आपको इसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो जाएगी. इनफैक्ट इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट वी स्पेंड अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम. ये जितना टाइम इस पे स्पेंड करते हैं उतना प्रपोजल अच्छा बनता जाता है. इट्स नॉट वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड. तो यू हैव टू
Thanks.
स्पेंड टाइम. बाकी यूनिवर्सिटी में सीनियर लोग जो हैं उनसे थोड़ी सी हेल्प ले लें. अदरवाइज वी आर अवेलेबल. मेरा भी ईमेल जो है वो आपके साथ शेयर्ड है. डॉक्टर मोहम्मद ने भी यहाँ पे किया, तो वी आर रेडी टू हेल्प जहाँ पे जरूरत हो.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Sir.
And needless to say, you can reach out to the HSC for any query that you may have regarding what needs to be done in filling out and completing these proposals. We have another question from Dr. Javeria Shamshad. Ji, please unmute कर लें आप.
Assalamu alaikum.
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
Actually, I want to know whether there is some template, as he just told that there is some draft for writing proposal for such. So that is available on the website, right?
There's a lot more information available on the website. Seems like you haven't. I think Grand Challenge Fund के तो first stage already हो चुकी है. We're now moving towards the second stage, and we've already given an extension, which was earlier 15 September was the submission date for the full project proposal, and we've extended that to 4th October now, so that you can some of you can benefit from this activity and exercise we are having. But you may still have a window for LCF. So, but if you are looking to avail these grants and these opportunities, then please visit HSC website regularly, and there's wealth of information. There are templates. There's eligibility criteria, which universities can apply for which grants, which PI, what is the criteria for PIs, and so on and so forth. And then you also have proposal templates that you can get from them. But if you struggle to get all of that information, you still have a question, you can write to us at HSC. And I'll leave my
Okay,
email
here is a
number.
suggestion from me for those people who don't have affiliation with the universities as the regular employees or the faculty members. Someone of you was saying that they are creating an open source website. So such thing can also be created for all the skilled labor, for all those researchers, so that if you people who are already in the faculty, they need such human resource, they can hire experts from there. And in such a way, experts, they will also have some opportunity to work with you. Did you get my point?
Yeah, I mean, so I have not fully understood what you said, but if you are saying that you need to be able to connect and network with researchers,
Yes.
So that you have ease of identifying collaborators and your teammates. We are at the end of this webinar series. We want to do something slightly different from last year. And we do realize that one of the big challenges that most of the teams face are in finding collaborators or strengthening their consortia. Consortia plays a big role. If your team doesn't have the capability, your project design might be good, but if your team doesn't have the capability to help you achieve those outcomes and impact, you may lose point and you may not get the funding. So what we've done is at the end of this webinar series on 21st and 22nd, we are hosting 2-day sessions in which we will do what we call research brokerage. where we have collaborated with some international platforms who will bring their audience, a network of international researchers, big top universities from Europe and US, and we would require those consortia who are looking for collaborators to come and give a short pitch. So we are doing what we can in this given short time, but a platform concept, of course, is a more long-term concept. And within component one of this higher education development program, we have designed already a program, RFP that was actually advertised, and we have also received calls against that RFP, in which what we're trying to do is create a virtual innovation research and incubation environment where researchers can collaborate, can share data, can showcase industry, international collaborators can see what is happening in each university, research, the status and maturity of R&D projects, technology, readiness levels, all those things. And as far as incubation activities are concerned, you can also carry out a lot of the virtual incubation activities on that platform. So we are creating that platform, but the pace at which we are going about doing the procurements in HSC, perhaps, this should have, already been completed by now, but we are a bit late on that. So I hope.
Okay, we will wait for that. Please include me in that one. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have another question from Sarish Munawar.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my question is so simple. It is because it is about we are actually 4 to 5 members in my team, and we applied many times for R&D projects, or you can say that research proposals, but we never get any confirmation of email or status of the project proposal, that to which level our
जी, तो इस पे आप हमें लिखें। अभी आज का जो सेशन है उसके ऊपर अगर आपका क्वेश्चन है तो जरूर आप पूछिए। ये अगर आप किसी कोई आपने अगर if you want feedback, then
I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that I have applied many times for the NRPU or even different project proposal. I offered different project proposals, but I never get some status of that they are rejected or not accepted, or what's the reason behind not accepting.
जी, so देखिए जी, I am a consultant here, and my task is to come and do certain activities. HSC has different platforms, so there's a review process, and this team that came in, they brought in a best practice review process. It's a 3-stage process. The process is in line with international best practices, but people who actually are following that process sometimes are not able to carry out their responsibilities as well as they need to, and we know that. And over a period of time, we're trying to identify who's a good reviewer, who's giving good reviews. HSC की अपनी जो capacity है of responding to all these queries that are coming to them, perhaps that also needs to be lifted. But that's really not part of my mandate, and that's really not the scope of today's discussion. So what I request you to do is any such questions that are outside the scope of today's session, you can write to me directly on my email, and I'll leave my email, and I'll help you connect with the right forums within HSC to respond to your queries and to be able to help you with what you need help with. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Dr. Huma, you have a question?
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for such a comprehensive explanation. My question is more particular about LCF, as like the way you were talking about your project, it was about the broader aspect, and it had a broader budget also. But there's a vast difference between the GCF and LCF. And as we are going to submit LCF now, so I just want to know that, like for GCF, of course, we have a broader idea, like the way you discussed, in under one umbrella, you have many objectives and many problems to be resolved and solved in the same umbrella. And for LCF, do we have to be, are we supposed to be very much precise? We have to pick up one problem from local challenge, or it can be a broader like GCF, because when you go to the website of HEC, where they have very well highlighted that what are the real issues, and in physical sciences you have these areas and you can work on these areas. But suppose, for example, I really want to work with some some area which is not being developed here in the Pakistan and not in the market, but whole world is striving towards that. So that would be a broader object that will have a broader object. So will LCF cover that, or I have to get myself precise and just pick up just one small problem and objective and work on that? So in this, I really need your guidance in this aspect.
And I would love my other panelists to also respond to this question. It's an important question. देखिए जी, GCF की हमने प्रायोरिटी थीम्स तो डिफाइन की हुई हैं, एंड आप हमारी HSC की वेबसाइट पर जाएंगे तो वो आपको सारी प्रायोरिटी थीम्स ही मिल जाएंगी. ग्रैंड चैलेंज, एज डॉक्टर मोहम्मद ओपल also explained in his presentation, needs to be something that's big enough in terms of the impact that you're looking to deliver for Pakistan, and should go beyond, not just limit to Pakistan. Perhaps it can go beyond also. So, but when you talk about local challenge, and the local challenge, we have two funding opportunities. One is LCF1 and the other is LCF2, which we have started this year. Last year wasn't there. But LCF1, the idea was that most of the time when we offer these through the HSC platform, these funding opportunities, the larger universities who have better resources, and they're able to exploit those opportunities much better than perhaps the other universities who don't enjoy as much, who are not as resourceful, if I would use that term. So the idea was that we wanted to create a specific instrument that would allow the less resourceful universities to also benefit. And in LCF1, if you look at the eligibility criteria for the PI, they need to come from the non-intensive, but they need to, in their consortia, involve a co-PI from a research-intensive university, so that they learn from the research-intensive university. So, but in LCF2, we have reversed that. In LCF2, what we say is that the PI must be from the research-intensive, and the co-PI must be from a non-research-intensive. But the idea was that we created LCF to support these less research-intensive universities, and the themes on which we want to focus on. LCF is all about SDGs. So universities spread across Pakistan, they're operating in different districts. There are a number of SDGs, perhaps that you need to choose from, that may be relevant to your community and to your area of research and to your area of work where you need to work. So, but small or big, I mean, whether it's LCF, GCF, I can tell you this much: the reviewers are looking for projects that are aiming at delivering high impact. So it's not that GCF, is high impact, but LCF is small impact. In both cases, you need to think of a solution. You need to think of a research project that can ultimately deliver significant impact, either at the national level or for your local community. And in the case of Grand Challenge, it can perhaps even go beyond the national level. But I would like my colleague, my other panelists, Dr. Mohamed Opal and Dr. Yasir, to also perhaps share their thoughts.
जी, मेरे ख्याल में आपने बड़ा अच्छा इसको एक्सप्लेन कर दिया है. जो local, when we talk about local challenge, so it means you are addressing a regional challenge. उसमें region जो है, it can be your city, it can be your district, it can be your division. Lekin where we are sitting, we need to address the challenges faced by the community of that area. So as per my understanding, ये इसके पीछे एक concept है. तो अगर आप कोशिश करें कि जहाँ पे आपकी यूनिवर्सिटी सिचुएटेड है, उसके इर्द-गिर्द के जो लोग हैं, वहाँ पे जो कम्युनिटी है, तो अगर आप उसके प्रॉब्लम्स को सॉल्व करेंगे, ऑफ कोर्स यू विल बी विनिंग द ग्रांट एज वेल. इसके अलावा एक और बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है, व्हेन वी टॉक विद द कम्युनिटी अबाउट यूनिवर्सिटीज, तो ये अमूमन बात होती है, ये कुछ नहीं करते, ये दे आर जस्ट गिविंग द डिग्रीज. तो ये एक इनफैक्ट परसेप्शन मैनेजमेंट है, एक चेंज है यूनिवर्सिटीज के रोल में, जो कि ये प्रोजेक्ट्स जो है वो लेके आएंगे. तो हमें एक ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव के अंदर एक लोकल जो चैलेंज है उसको देखने की जरूरत.
राइट, ओके, थैंक यू सो मच.
Right, so I think we are over time now, but we have one last question. Nusrat Jahan, Dr. Nusrat Jahan, if you could please unmute.
Yes, I have a just suggestion, or it could be a question. Is it possible to give an example of a successful health-related project in the past GCF rounds? Because both of these projects, they were from engineering field. So is it possible if there is any successful project from health-related matter, because nowadays it's a very big challenge?
Dr. Nusrat, I think you also submitted a recent, and I think you also raised a question on Wachovia mosquito. I think you're working on that, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we awarded 5 GCF. Instead of me sharing that information on this forum, I'm very happy to respond to your email. आप अपनी ईमेल छोड़ दें इस चैट के ऊपर, मैं आपको हेल्थ के अंदर जो हमारे प्रोजेक्ट्स थे, अगर उसमें से कोई हमने अवार्ड किया है, वो मैं आपको इंफॉर्मेशन शेयर कर दूंगा ईमेल के ऊपर, if that's okay with you.
Actually, I didn't have a problem with the project.
I would like to add ये public information है, abstracts जो हैं वो अगर आप research.hec.gov.pk पे जाएं, तो वहाँ पे जो approved projects हैं वो उनके abstracts पड़े हुए हैं. तो I guess one of them is on health.
Okay, I will say. I didn't have actually problem with the project because the project was actually approved, because only at the time of presentation, the relevant reviewer was not from my field. He is PhD in botany, and I am doing in medical entomology. And it's a hell of difference between the two. The relevant reviewer who actually have irrelevant question that was not actually related with me. This is the point.
इसमें डॉक्टर नसरत ये लास्ट सेशन में भी मैंने आपको एक्सप्लेन किया था जी, आपको लास्ट सेशन में भी मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया था बड़ा क्लियरली दैट दिस इज नॉट अ फोरम फॉर ग्रीवेंस. सो वो ग्रीवेंस की डिस्कशंस जो है ना, वो आप प्लीज वो हमने ग्रीवेंस का एक प्रोसेस रखा हुआ है एचएससी में, एंड आई डोंट डील विद दैट. माय वर्क इज वेरी डिफरेंट हियर. सो वो आप प्लीज उस प्रोसेस को फॉलो कीजिए, एंड आई वुड बी वेरी हैप्पी टू हेल्प यू थ्रू दैट प्रोसेस. यू कैन राइट टू मी. But do follow that process, because unless you follow that process, there's not much anyone can do, right?
In my understanding, it is not a grievance. It is just HTC need to find the foreign reviewers if there is no relevant reviewer in Pakistan. This is actually the point. It's not a grievance. What has happened now, I can't change that thing now.
No, you can certainly apply. You can certainly put your grievance application and have a second review on your proposal. And I would encourage you to do that if you so strongly feel about this. And I think you have a good proposal from what I learned from you in the last session. So आप ज़रूर लिखिए. And जहाँ तक हमारे reviewers की बात है, we have local and international reviewers, but this is an evolving process. On day one, we can't have the best reviewers from all over the world come and start working and supporting our R&D activities in universities. And so we're trying to build that database, and also every year the reviewers, the work they're doing, we are going into detail and evaluating their work and grading them and ranking them. Those who are not performing are being taken out of our review process, and those who are doing a good job, we are ranking them high so that we give them more opportunity to review in future also. But this is an evolving process, and over a period of time, we can build our research capacity and review capacity. And this year, we were also supposed to have some further workshops in which we were supposed to train reviewers and researchers and further strengthen our database for both researchers and reviewers. But that hasn't happened so far. Anyway, I think, Dr. Yasser has already guided you. You can look at the abstracts of health projects, but if you need further detail on any one of those projects, I'm happy to respond to you or my email. And as far as your proposal is concerned, anything I can do, please write to me. I'll help you out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we've taken about 13 minutes extra over our scheduled time. I really thank our panelists, Dr. Mohamed Opal and Dr. Yasser Nawab, for a fantastic presentation, for taking time out, their precious time out of their activities. It's a very critical activity we are carrying out. Last year, we had a target of about 25 GCF proposals that we wanted to fund. We could only fund 5. We hope that this year, through our efforts, we will be able to fund more. And the support we are getting from our senior researchers in today's session from Dr. Yasser and Dr. Mohamed Opal, we must all appreciate that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today. And the live recordings of the recordings of these live sessions will also be available on the HEC website. If anyone joined late, or if anyone's colleagues couldn't join, perhaps you can guide them to our links on the HEC page, and they can review this recording, this session, and also the previous sessions and the future sessions. Thank you.